When the stock market crashed in 1929, the real story wasn't about numbers on a ticker tape. It was about people. The Great Depression didn't just happen overnight. It was a slow, grinding process that peeled away the illusion of endless prosperity, forcing an entire generation to confront what truly mattered. Imagine this. One day, you wake up, and the bank on your corner, the one holding your life savings, has its doors chained shut. Forever. Across America, this became reality. Families who had built comfortable lives suddenly had nothing. Fathers who once walked to their office jobs in crisp suits now stood in bread lines, their eyes filled with a quiet desperation. Children who should have been worrying about schoolyard games learned the gnawing ache of hunger. For the first time, a whole nation was forced to ask a terrifying question. What do we do when the system we trusted completely fails us? But in that profound darkness, something incredible began to flicker to life. It was a light that no economist could ever chart on a graph. Ordinary people started adapting in extraordinary ways. They rediscovered an almost forgotten ingenuity. Kitchen scraps, once destined for the trash, were transformed into hearty soups. Old curtains and worn-out blankets were stitched into new clothes for growing children. And most importantly, individual struggle was transformed into collective solidarity. This wasn't some grand, organized movement. It was spontaneous and deeply human. When governments were slow to react, communities came together. Neighbors who might have only exchanged polite nods before pooled their resources to set up makeshift kitchens in back alleys and empty lots. Churches and town halls threw open their doors, becoming shelters for the homeless. The currency of the day wasn't the dollar. It was a cup of flour, a spare potato, a shared blanket. People shared what little they had because they understood a fundamental truth. No one could get through this alone. Out in the countryside, the crisis hit differently but just as hard. Farmers who once grew crops for a bustling market watched prices plummet until their harvests were worth less than the cost of shipping them. So they returned to an older way of life. They started bartering. A bag of potatoes might be traded for a few jars of canned peaches. A farmer with a milk cow would share with a neighbor who could mend a broken plow. It was a complex, informal economy built on trust and mutual need. Back in the cities, the resourcefulness was just as striking. Women became masters of repair, mending clothes until the fabric was more patch than original cloth. Teenagers, desperate to ease the burden on their families, left home with nothing but a few cents in their pockets. They hitchhiked across the country, chasing whispers of work, of jobs in a factory or on a farm. Rumors that often turned out to be just that, rumors. These weren't just faceless statistics in a history book. Each one was a story of courage, of hope against all odds, of a resilience that our textbooks often forget to mention. When Franklin D. Roosevelt took office, he didn't just see an economic problem. He saw a crisis of spirit. He famously declared that the only thing we had to fear was fear itself. His New Deal wasn't just a set of policies. It was a declaration of war against despair. Programs like the Civilian Conservation Corps didn't just give young men jobs planting trees and building parks. They gave them a purpose, a reason to get up in the morning. The Works Progress Administration didn't just build bridges, roads, and schools. It turned hopelessness into tangible progress, creating art and infrastructure that we still benefit from today. With every paycheck earned, a little bit of faith in the future was restored. But let's be clear, the real miracle wasn't orchestrated from Washington, D.C. The true heroes of this story were the everyday people. They didn't have self-help gurus or life hack influencers to guide them. They had something far more powerful: grit. They learned through the hardest of circumstances that survival isn't about accumulating luxuries or chasing comfort. It's about character. It's about your willingness to get your hands dirty, to learn new skills, to rely on your neighbor, and to have them rely on you. They discovered that when the world as you know it collapses, Your most valuable asset isn't what's in your bank account. It's your adaptability. It's your ability to look at a problem and find a solution, no matter how unconventional. That generation, forged in the fires of the Depression, emerged from it stronger, humbler, and more unified than ever before. They understood the value of community, the importance of thrift, and the power of a shared struggle. They learned profound lessons about what it means to be human. Lessons that could have, and perhaps should have, guided every generation that followed. The story of the Great Depression isn't just a warning about economic fragility. It's a timeless testament to the unbreakable strength of the human spirit. Ever hear the saying, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it"? Well, right now, we might be living proof. Decades ago, our grandparents and great-grandparents lived through one of the darkest economic times in modern history, the Great Depression. The generation that survived it swore they would never let it happen again. They were shaped by hardship. They learned to be resourceful, to save, to value community, and to never, ever take prosperity for granted. They worked tirelessly, saved every penny they could, and built a world of comfort and stability for their children. They wanted to give us a better life, a life free from the fear and uncertainty they had known. And they succeeded. But with that comfort, something dangerous crept in: forgetfulness. The hard-won lessons, seared into the minds of an entire generation, began to fade. We got comfortable, we got complacent, and now we're standing on the edge of a cliff, completely oblivious to the long drop below, because the echoes of the 1920s are getting louder and louder. Let's talk about the first lesson we've forgotten. Stability is an illusion. Think back to the Roaring '20s. It was a decade-long party. The stock market was soaring to unbelievable heights. New technologies were changing the world, and people genuinely believed the good times would never end. Sound familiar? Look around today. We see stock markets hitting all-time highs, cryptocurrency creating overnight millionaires, and tech companies with valuations that defy logic. We tell ourselves, this time it's different. We have the internet. We have globalization. We're smarter now. But history has a way of whispering back, no, it's not. The fundamental forces of human greed and fear haven't changed. The economic cycles of boom and bust haven't been erased. We're riding a wave, convinced we're controlling it, forgetting that every wave eventually crashes onto the shore. The belief that this time is different is one of the most expensive sentences in history. In 1929, that belief cost people everything. Are we making the same bet today? The second lesson is one we desperately need to relearn. Money is a tool, not a god. During the Great Depression, people made a horrifying discovery. The cash they had saved, the numbers in their bank accounts, could become worthless almost overnight. Banks failed. Life savings vanished. And the paper they thought was wealth turned out to be just paper. So what was real wealth? It was skills. It was knowledge. The people who survived, and even thrived, were the ones who could do things. The carpenter who could build a shelf, the mechanic who could fix an engine, the farmer who could grow food, the seamstress who could mend clothes. Their abilities were the ultimate currency because they provided real, tangible value to their communities. Now look at us. We chase digital numbers on a screen. We value stock portfolios more than practical skills. We've traded real-world productivity for digital convenience. How many of us know how to fix a leaky faucet, grow our own vegetables, or even change a tire without watching a YouTube tutorial? We've outsourced our own capabilities. And in doing so, we've made ourselves incredibly fragile. A civilization that values clicking over creating is a civilization weakening from the inside out. This brings us to the third powerful lesson. Self-reliance builds nations. When the entire system collapsed in the 1930s, when the banks closed, the government seemed powerless, and the corporations laid everyone off, people stopped waiting for a savior. They realized no one was coming to help them. So they helped themselves. And more importantly, they helped each other. Communities organized. Neighbors planted victory gardens in their backyards and shared the harvest. People pooled their skills. One person would fix a neighbor's roof in exchange for a few jars of canned goods. They created their own microeconomies based on trust and mutual support. This wasn't just about survival. It was about reclaiming their power. The lesson was stark and simple. When you depend entirely on massive, faceless institutions for your well-being, you become powerless the moment they fail. And institutions do fail. Today, we've become more dependent than ever. We rely on global supply chains for our food, giant energy grids for our power, and complex financial systems for our money. We've lost that spirit of local, community-based resilience. We've traded our independence for convenience, and that's a dangerous bargain. The fourth lesson is perhaps the most psychological and the most potent. Fear destroys faster than failure. The Great Depression didn't just happen because of bad economic policy or a stock market crash. It spiraled out of control because of a virus far more contagious than any disease: panic. When people lost faith in the system itself shattered. It was a crisis of confidence. A run on the banks wasn't caused by the banks already being empty. It was the fear that they might become empty that caused everyone to rush in and, in doing so, fulfill the prophecy. People stopped spending, stopped investing, and hoarded what little they had. Fear paralyzed the economy. Once belief dies, the entire structure collapses. No amount of government intervention or financial data can fix a crisis of faith. And we see that same destructive fear today. It's what drives market crashes, frantic sell-offs, and social unrest. We live in an age of anxiety, constantly bombarded with news that fuels our deepest fears. When our collective confidence in our institutions, our leaders, and each other finally breaks, the economic fallout is just the beginning. And that leads to the final, and maybe the most profound lesson of all. Gratitude keeps you alive. If you talk to anyone who actually lived through those years, you'll hear something surprising. When they talk about what got them through, they don't talk about money or possessions. They talk about the little things. Happiness wasn't found in abundance. It was found in simple, profound appreciation. Having a warm meal on the table, the comfort of a roof over their head, no matter how humble, the loyalty of a friend who would share their last piece of bread, the laughter of their children. That was wealth. That was everything. Maybe that's the ultimate lesson we've forgotten. We've become so focused on what we don't have that we've lost the ability to be grateful for what we do. We don't value our health until we're sick. We don't value our relationships until we're alone. And we don't value our prosperity until it's stripped bare. We think progress is our shield. We think our technology, our wealth, our modern world protects us. But really, it only shields us from memory. And the further we move away from the harsh realities of 1929, the closer we unknowingly drift back toward its shadow. Look at the world right now. Record levels of personal and national debt. Soaring prices for basic necessities. Financial markets stretched into the realm of fantasy, completely disconnected from the real economy. The same sense of entitlement, the same arrogance, the same belief that the rules no longer apply. It's the same music that was playing just before the lights went out in the 1920s. We've forgotten how fragile prosperity truly is. The Great Depression wasn't just a historical event. It wasn't just a tragedy. It was a teacher, a brutal, unforgiving teacher. And like all great teachers, it reserves its harshest punishments for the students who refuse to listen. The question is, are we listening now? Thank you for joining me on this journey through history. If you believe these lessons are more important than ever, and that we need to remember them before it's too late, please show your support. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and hit that subscribe button. Let's make sure history remains a lesson, not a life sentence. Until next time, stay vigilant.